Hi guys, my name is Trinity, and if you are here, you must be here to talk about books because that's why I'm here, to talk about books. And in today's video, I am going to be asking you guys some questions, trying to direct you guys to books that you will find appealing. This is a little bit of a recommendations video, but it is also a breakdown of why we love books, what motivates you to read. You guys have seen enough of my videos to know that I am a plot-driven reader, that I don't like a lot of description, and that I think world building is great, but a lot of it is unnecessary. So, in today's video, we're going to break down what makes a good book and what drives people to read. What makes a book a favorite? All of these things we're going to talk about, and I'm going to give you some recommendations based on that. So the first distinction that everybody looks for in books is character-driven versus plot-driven. A lot of people go into reading, a lot of people start looking for books and are not aware of what actually makes the book good to them. There are quite a few of us, especially us booktubers and book bloggers, who know our reading tastes very well. And many of us are keenly aware of the fact that we are either plot-driven or character-driven. But I have come to find out in recommending books as long as I have, and you guys might be asking yourselves, well, what qualifies you to give us all of this knowledge? This actually, I do have an English degree, but this actually comes from 15 years of retail sales and five of those years being book sales. And one of the things that they tell you in retail is keep asking questions. We need to get them in the right product. We need to get them in the right book. Keep asking questions. And they can't be yes or no. They have to be leading questions. So, plot-driven versus character-driven. How do you know which one you are and what side you fall into? Maybe you like plot and character. Maybe you like character exposition, but you would rather the book not focus on that. Well, if you are a plot-driven reader, one of the main things that will stick out to you is how fast-paced the story moves. Now, this is not saying that every plot-driven book is going to be fast-paced. It's how does it feel to you? If you know you are on track, headed for motivations, goals, you can see how all of the building blocks are adding up to get us to this certain place, and you are loving it, plot-driven. A good representation of plot-driven novel would be Mistborn. Now, people might want to argue that Mistborn is not plot-driven, it is character-driven. Really sit down and think about that, because as much as we focus on some characters, we are always trucking towards an end goal. In all of the Mistborn books, it is this way. My next example would be Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan. Valen Alsorna is telling us his story, and in this story, we grow with him. So this is an example of a book that is plot-driven that isn't necessarily fast-paced, but it keeps you engaged because you like seeing the building blocks of each step in the, or each rung in the ladder, as you will, of the plot of this book. This is also where a lot of young adult readers fall into. A lot of urban fantasy readers fall into. If you really love Kim Harrison and Rachel Morgan, the Hollows series, you're probably a plot-driven reader. If you like Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, you are probably a plot-driven reader. If you like Red Rising by Pierce Brown, you're probably a plot-driven reader. But a lot of young adult really focus more on the plot and less on the characters and less on the world building. Now, on the flip side of that, how do you know if you're a character-driven reader? Let's focus on some character-driven works. The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. This is a heist novel. However, you spend so much time with Locke and Co. delving into their history, into their backstory, into how they became who they were, and that drives the story. This is also an example of a fast-paced, character-driven novel. Another character-driven novel would be Name of the Wind. We have the same type of setup as Bloodsong. However, we are being told this story of Kavoth, and he's really delving into his past bit by bit, piece by piece. He's giving you his life story in full detail. As opposed to Bloodsong, where we are getting glimpses of Valen's past and how he gets to where he's going. Also, if you are a plot-driven reader, there is a good chance you will like modern fantasy as opposed to classic fantasy. And if you are a character-driven reader, you might enjoy some classic fantasy more than you do modern fantasy. Second thing that a lot of people talk about when breaking down what they enjoy about books is prose. This one is a little hard to pin down because it's a you like what you like type of situation. And people can talk about flowery prose, and some people will be like, no, I don't want that in my life. Or you can talk about flowery prose and people are like, oh, that was beautifully written, and so many more descriptive words that they can use for that. As you can tell, you can probably guess which one I prefer. However, when people start talking about beautifully written works and great prose and everything like that, here is where a few distinctions occur. Laini Taylor is a young adult author who has beautiful prose. It is flowery, but she can construct a sentence that will leave you just feeling all the whimsical vibes and all of that stuff that people who like those books are looking for. I do love Laini Taylor, so you can throw me into that as well. Brandon Sanderson is utilitarian in his prose, which means that a lot of his works do not have beautifully constructed sentences. He is straightforward in his tellings, and he ends up being an author that people can really glom onto because all of his works are straightforward and very understandable and very easy. Now, you get into things like the Lycanus trilogy, Wheel of Time, things like that, where there is beautiful prose to be had, but I'm going to talk about those in a little bit and focus on people like John Gwynne, Scott Lynch, Madeline Miller, and things like The 10,000 Doors of January or The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. These are very great examples of beautiful, well written prose. Now, Scott Lynch is kind of on the gutter humor side of beautiful prose, and Erin Morgenstern is like, oh my gosh, these words are just creating images in my mind type of great prose. But that doesn't mean that just because you have utilitarian prose that your books are bad. There will be people who prefer that. It's more accessible, it's easier to read. There's not a lot of guesswork in trying to figure out where the novel is going. All of these metaphors aren't clogging up your brain. And so you might prefer that. And again, like I said, Brandon Sanderson is a great example. Leigh Bardugo is another great example. R.F. Kuang and Stephen R. Lawhead. These are all great examples of people who have fairly utilitarian prose, but great stories that will push you to keep reading. So I would highly recommend them. Now, there are people who fall into the middle of that, where their prose is not flowery and not quite utilitarian either. And I would say Anthony Ryan and Giles Christian really have a solid middle of beautiful prose and utilitarian, like kind of meshed together. And I adore that. And then I want to talk about also setting-driven novels and setting-driven readers. So there are a lot of people who can focus on the setting and have that be enough for them to keep reading. There are many examples of this. The Book Thief is one that comes to mind. 10,000 Doors of January, The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, Queen of Blood by Sarah Beth Durst. Now, generally, if you are a setting-driven reader, world building is very, very important to you. And while there are so many who could be a mesh of all of these things, it's going to be books like those that really, really grab your attention. And let's talk about unlikable characters versus hero characters. So there are a lot of people out there, myself included, who really like rooting for the underdog. And a lot of times that means liking the unlikable character, like Ren from the Poppy War, Kavoth from The Name of the Wind, Kaz Brekker from Six of Crows, Glokta from the First Law trilogy. And in character-driven novels, these characters are usually really well fleshed out, and you get to see why they're not so great, why they're not the nicest people in the world. And I think that is what fascinates me personally for unlikable characters. But there are also a lot of people who really, really need a hero to root for, such as Sebastian de Castell's Traitor's Blade. Mistborn Stormlight Archive could definitely fall into this. Not that there aren't unlikable characters in those, but very, very less likely to occur in Brandon Sanderson novels. Peter V. Brett's Demon Cycle series, and that does have a good mix of heroic and unlikable as well. John Gwen, Faithful in the Fallen series, definitely some heroic characters there. But a lot of people need to have that character that they can root for because they are good for the sake of good. Darrow in Red Rising. And there's nothing wrong with liking either one of these. What I want to focus on is you might be a character-driven reader if that is your focus while reading. If you need to like the characters, you might be a character-driven reader. If you start to care deeply for characters, like they are real people, you might be a character-driven reader. And all of these things combined really give us an idea of what we like in books. And if you know what you like in books, it's so much easier to find books that you will like moving forward, such as Goodreads lists, Storygraph lists, book bloggers who like what you like, booktubers who like what you like. Also, book bloggers and booktubers who like the opposite of what you like, because generally what they DNF or what they rate low, you might want to look into, because they might have differing opinions from you, but that also tells you that you can trust their dislikes just as much as a booktuber or a book blogger that you do like the same things their likes. Now, I won't get into specific genres other than what I have discussed here previously, because tastes are going to account for whether or not you like contemporary, whether or not you like fantasy, horror, all of that. I'm basically giving you the building blocks to find books in the future in any genre that you would like to read. But that is my video for today. Like, subscribe, do all the fun things, and I will see you later.